الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى بسنة إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. This afternoon we'll be looking at the fundamentals of Islamic law, usool-ul-fiqh. And before going into it, it is important for us to understand the distinction between Sharia and fiqh, because both of these terms are translated as Islamic law. Sharia and fiqh, both terms are translated as Islamic law, so we need to really be clear so we don't use them in a manner which is inappropriate. Both of them are related to Islamic law. They do represent Islamic law, but different facets. Fiqh itself literally means the true understanding of what is intended by something. You know, there's a statement of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, whoever Allah wishes good for, He gives him the true understanding of the religion. And the term is said, يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. يُفَقِّهُ فِي الدِّينِ. Because fiqh literally means, as I said, understanding. So Allah gives that full understanding to those whom He wishes good. Sharia actually literally means a water hole, a place where water collects that the animals come to drink from. That's what it literally means, a water hole. Or it is sometimes used to indicate the straight path, the correct path, Sharia. This can be first found in verse 18 of Surah 45, which is al-Jafiyah, in which Allah says, ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاكَ عَلَى شَرِيعَةٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ. Then we have put you on a straight path in your affairs. Right? However, when we're looking at the two terms, technically speaking, with regards to the whole area of Islamic law, the Sharia represents divine revelation. Or divinely revealed law. That is, Qur'an and Sunnah. It is the law based on revelation, which is itself revelation. Whereas fiqh represents the human attempt to apply this divine law in their daily lives. The human understanding of the divine law and its application. That is the fiqh. Now, the important difference between the two, from a practical point of view, is that the divine law is unchangeable. This is unchangeable. whereas fiqh is changeable. Classical example of that is what we spoke about in the case of smoking. When I gave you the explanation as to the law concerning smoking cigarettes, we said that initially it was held that smoking was makruh, disliked, based on the evidence concerning smoking at the time when Muslims first came in contact with it. However, from 1980 onwards, where it was identified as being cancer-causing, then it shifted from the category of being makruh, disliked, to one of being haram, because it causes human death. Now, the evidence used to prove that it's makruh came from Sharia. The evidence used to prove that it is haram came from Sharia. The fiqh ruling has changed from makruh to haram, but the evidence from the Sharia has not changed. The evidence still remains. And wherever a circumstance arises which is applicable to the first piece of evidence, which was that of eating garlic. Remember, we said the proof used by the early scholars for saying smoking was makruh was that it caused bad breath. And eating garlic, Prophet Muhammad has said that those who eat garlic should not come to our masjids because of the odorous breath which comes, which is offensive and makes people uncomfortable. So those who are eating garlic, raw garlic, should not come to the masjid. So on the basis of that, it was ruled that, of course, eating raw garlic is makruh. Similarly, for a person to smoke cigarettes, it would be similarly makruh. However, the evidence for it being haram was that Prophet Muhammad said, whoever kills himself in this life will find himself in the next life killing himself as he killed himself in this life perpetually. Right? So the evidence has not changed in the Sharia. Whenever we come across something which has to do with bad breath, we go back to that same evidence used from the Sharia concerning eating garlic. And whenever we find something which causes death, then we use the other law. As we said, a person who is a diabetic, if the doctor tells them you take sugar, you will die, then the second law is applicable to him. Though sugar is halal, but for that person sugar becomes haram. So here the ruling on a particular substance may vary according to the person, the effects that it has on that person. So that was the first major distinction between the two. The second distinction exists in the actual definition itself. We said this was based on divine revelation, whereas this is based on human understanding. Okay, this was the second point. This is divine revelation, whereas this is human understanding. And the third point is that the laws of Sharia are general in the most part, whereas those of fiqh are specific. The laws of Sharia, they tend to govern general circumstances, whereas the laws of fiqh apply to specific instances. So this is how, because some people will question how it is that we can have laws which were revealed 1400 years ago and still want to apply these laws today. See, from a Western point of view, where laws are made by human beings, it is not practical to try to apply laws made by human beings. Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah. Laws made by human beings 1400 years ago to today, because our circumstances have changed. The circumstances of life have changed. The outlook of people 1400 years ago has changed from the outlook of people today. The system of organization of society has changed. Everything, the whole socio-economic structure of the society has changed. So the laws of 1400 years ago are not applicable to today. This is Western concepts of law, that law will vary and must change according to the needs of the society as time goes on. And because society changes, the laws must change. So that's why they question, well, they say the Sharia, Islamic law, this is something like trying to go back to the Dark Ages, to the times of the Dark Ages, and, it's not practical. However, fiqh is changing. The fiqh is changing as time goes on. The Sharia doesn't change. That is the foundation, because it is revealed by Allah, who knows human beings in and out. He is the one who created human beings. He knows the inner and outer concerning human beings. He then could reveal the laws which were to stand for all times. Laws which address the basic nature of the human being. And human nature does not change. Allah Akbar, Allah. So, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on His last Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and on all his companions. We stopped at the distinction between Sharia and Fiqh. And the purpose of this was basically to lay a foundation for going into the fundamentals of Islamic law. Since we said that the foundation of Islamic law is divine revelation, it means then that when we look at fiqh, the fundamentals or the basic sources of fiqh have to begin with the Qur'an, because it is the primary source of revelation, the Qur'an. And in our topic on the sciences of the Qur'an, we went into the definition of what the Qur'an is, etc., etc. And we discussed also the miraculous aspects of the Qur'an. Now, with regards to the laws of the Qur'an, which will be applied in fiqh, what we found when we were discussing the tafsir of the Qur'an was that much of what is in the Qur'an is in a general format. Allah says, pray, give zakah, make hajj. But the details of how to pray, give zakah, compulsory charity, and to make hajj, pilgrimage, this is left to the sunnah. So, for the most part, though when we are approaching any issue, because what we're looking at fiqh now is the practical application of Sharia. When we're looking at any issue, or issue arises amongst us, we have to determine how to handle this situation. We first look to the Qur'an to see if there are any general laws which cover it. If we can't find it, then we have to go on to the next source, the Sunnah. Right? These are our basic source of revelation. This is our basic source of guidance. Now, though as a general rule, the laws, as I said, of the Qur'an are not that specific, you do have some examples of specificity. And that is in the case of inheritance. You find the verses which deal with it, like in Surah An-Nisa, verse 11. Allah advises you concerning your children's inheritance. The male should get a portion equal to 2 females. If there are only daughters, 2 or more should receive 2/3 of the inheritance. And if only one, her share is a half. And it goes on, breaking down the details. However, when we come to, for example, theft, where somebody steals, the law in the Qur'an, وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَسَبَا لَكَانَ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Cut off the hands of the male and female thief as a punishment, by example from Allah, for their crime. Now, in Arabic, the word hand refers from here to here. It includes this, and it all goes all the way up to here. So how do we know how much to cut off? Right? According to the law of the Qur'an, it could be any of them. Thus, it is required for us to go to the Sunnah to find out what did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when this law was revealed, what did the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ specify with regards to the amount to be cut off. And we find that or even at what, when you say theft, is there a minimum or a maximum for cutting the hand off? See, when we go into the Sunnah, the practice of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we find out that he defined the hand as being up to the wrist, and that the amount, minimum amount for which a hand may be amputated, is that of a dinar, right? A quarter of a dinar, actually, quarter of a dinar. That is the minimum amount. Stolen, what is stolen underneath it, less than that, one does not cut the hand off. And there are other conditions too, which come out from the Sunnah, which clarify, for example, that if it is in a time of hunger and somebody steals, you don't cut their hand off. Or if somebody steals from the person they're working for, and the one who they're working for was not paying them their wages, then again the hand is not cut off, because there's justification. And also, if the theft is an open theft, in the sense that you left your watch on the table and you came back and it is gone, they will not cut your hand off for that watch. But if you had your watch in your pocket and somebody put their hand in their pocket and took it, they will cut the hand off. You see, because the watch on the table is temptation. Everybody gets weak in an instant and they will snatch it. But the one who is going in the pocket, this is not a question of temptation now. This is a professional criminal. Right? You see, this is the difference. See, again, the law, though we have the general law cutting off the hand, most people don't know that there are actually finer points, details, which clarify at what point do you cut the hand off. How much do you cut off, under what circumstances. Actually, even you go back into the inheritance, though much detail is there, you still will find additional detail given by the Sunnah. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that a Muslim may not inherit from a non-Muslim, nor may a non-Muslim inherit from a Muslim. If a man marries a Christian woman and he dies, she cannot inherit from him. If she dies, he cannot inherit from her. That is Islamic law. Of course, I know what is going on here. It's quite the opposite, right? However, according to Islamic law, that is the law. However, the man, though the woman may not be able to inherit from him, he is allowed to give a gift. He knows he's going to die or whatever. He may give a gift called a wasiyah. Wasiyah he can give, which is up to 1/3 of his property. That's the maximum. He is free to give that much to his wife. And the wasiyah is given only to those who would not normally inherit by the normal laws of inheritance. So there is the Islam, you see the wisdom of Islam. Though the general rule is no, Muslim cannot, but at the same time, Islam does take into account this man has been married to this woman, she has done good, in raising the children, looking after the home, etc. She does deserve something. So there is provision there in the law allowing that man to give to her also. Though the general rule is that they cannot inherit each other. Now, if we leave the Sunnah, the Qur'an and the Sunnah, what we find is that after the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when issues arose during the time of the Sahaba, they would go back trying to find in the Qur'an or the Sunnah some kind of support for whatever solutions they were trying to develop for the problems that were arising. Remember, I told you the story of the time of Abu Bakr in the collection of the Qur'an, when the Caliph Omar recognized, he wasn't the Caliph at the time, but he recognized that a number of the Muslims who had memorized large portions of the Qur'an were dying in the battles. He came to Omar and suggested to him to collect the Qur'an, Abu Bakr to collect the Qur'an into one text, so that it may not stop. And what was Abu Bakr's response? Abu Bakr's response was, how can I do that? Something which Prophet Muhammad didn't do. Very, very careful. Not wanting to bring anything new into the religion, to preserve the religion as it was. Because the Prophet Muhammad had said so many times, warning them about any kind of changes in the religion. Because this was the final message of God to man. It had to be preserved as none of the earlier messages were to be preserved. So the warnings were there to the righteous to take full care to preserve that message as it was. And of course, Allah chose to preserve the message because He was because He had chosen Muhammad ﷺ to be the last of the messengers. And furthermore, it was He who raised up amongst the Muslims those who would take on the responsibility of preserving the message by instruction from the Prophet Muhammad. So, the companions, whenever they had to make a decision, they would go back and look to see from the Qur'an and the Sunnah to find. Now, once they found sufficient evidence, then they would agree together that this was the path that they were going to take. Because they had mutual consultation. Though it was Abu Bakr and Omar who were having the discussion, the other companions were also brought in. So it was a group decision made, with Abu Bakr being the leader of the group making the final acceptance of that decision. That group decision is known as ijma'. Ijma' or consensus. Consensus of opinion. And it's specifically referring to of the Sahaba. Ijma'. Now, this has been extended by some scholars to go beyond the time of the Sahaba. But the most safe position concerning this principle is to stay within the period of the Sahaba, because this was the period when they were close together. It was possible to get a consensus. Once you go beyond their period, then the consensus of the leading Muslims becomes very difficult because of communications, etc. Another example of ijma, or a decision made in Islamic law concerning or being done by consensus, is that of the 2 adhans of Jum'ah. That in the time of Uthman, Caliph Uthman, the place surrounding the masjid, Masjid al-Nabawi, was like this, right? Before, there were houses all around it. Houses were right up next to the masjid, all around. That's why sometimes now you'll find they have one called Bab Omar. Those of you who have been to them. This is because this is the one which used to go past, Omar's house. Omar was this, Bab Ali, so and so, because they were living all around. The wives of the Prophet ﷺ homes, was over this side. Okay? He died in Aisha's home, right? Because he used to leave right out of Aisha's home door and leave the Salah. Right? All the homes also, they all had doors going to the masjid. Okay? And later he was buried where he died. And the masjid during the time of the Sahaba, etc., they expanded this way. But after the time of the Sahaba, they expanded also this way. And they demolished all the other homes, leaving the home of Aisha where Prophet Muhammad was buried, and this ended up inside the masjid. But in fact, according to Islamic law, that should not be inside the masjid. This is the situation today. In a much later time, in the time of the Turks, they put over it the green dome. Traditionally, when you see the picture of Medina, or the symbol of Medina, it is the green dome and the minaret. But actually, this green dome is innovation. The building of the dome over the grave of the Prophet ﷺ is forbidden. Prophet ﷺ told Ali to go, and anywhere that he found any grave which was more than a palm's width above the ground, he should level it with the ground. Any structures built over graves, right, or these things were to be removed and the graves leveled flat. The Muslim graveyard doesn't look, with the proper Muslim graveyard, you don't see any kind of, structures and nameplates and, tombstones and all this kind of thing. This is not the Muslim graveyard. Muslim graveyard is a plain area. The way you will know is, for example, one may ask, well, how do you know where your father's grave is? Okay, well, what they do, they have a wall, they put numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then down here, maybe they put letters A, B, C, D. So you have rows. You know your father was in 2B. That's where his grave is. Enough. So, what happened was, in the time of Uthman, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's masjid, the city had gone very big. There used to be marketplace over here. Marketplace got very large. Islam had spread rapidly. A lot of goods had come into the marketplace and enlarged itself. So the adhan which was being made from inside of the masjid, or actually was made, they used to stand on the upper, some log or something, let's call it, on the outside. The adhan could no longer be heard inside of the marketplace. Business, trading, etc. was so loud, it drowned out the adhan. So, they decided, because they need to let these people in the marketplace know that Salah was coming. So about an hour before the time for the adhan of Jummah, because there's only one adhan of Jummah, they used to send somebody into the marketplace, and he would call an adhan here, a pre-adhan, in order to let the people know that the adhan for Jummah is going to be coming, so start to close up your business and prepare yourself for there. That's where the first adhan for Jummah came from. And as the marketplace got bigger in time, they sent another person over here, and he would call adhan from over here. And when it got bigger, they added another one. All of them going to different parts of the marketplace, calling the adhan to let them know. As the city got bigger, like this. Now, once they developed the microphone, right, where inside of the masjid you're calling one adhan that can be heard all over the city. No need for these anymore. No need. You see? But what happened is that people were caught in the ritual. So now, even you all here, at least, in Riyadh, you'll hear that earlier than 1 hour before. If Salah is 12 o'clock, around 10:30, you'll hear an adhan to let the people know that the adhan for Jummah will be coming. But you all in your place here now, you have one adhan is made, and as soon as you sit down, the Imam gets up, he says, another adhan is made. Totally pointless. That previous adhan there is totally pointless. What you may as well do is go back to what was done in the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, in the time of Abu Bakr, in the time of Omar, and halfway during the reign of the time of Uthman. What they did was when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came in the masjid, he said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, sat down, and the adhan was made. Finish. That's it. That is fiqh. You see, fiqh is living, changeable. What happens is that unfortunately people get caught up in the ritual and it becomes rigid. You see, and that is very dangerous. Because Islam is a living religion. It's a way of life. The flexibility is there. It's supposed to change with the changing circumstances. Where the need arises, something develops. Where the need is no longer there, it is dropped. You go on. That's how it should be. However, what has happened is that many of the earlier practices now became standard rituals which are handed down. Nobody knows why they're doing it anymore. Even, actually, matter of fact, in Pakistan, what is common there, India and Pakistan, when they make the first adhan, they invented 2 sunnahs which come after that adhan. So the people will come into the masjid, they come and they sit down and wait for the first adhan. When the first adhan is made, then they get up and make 2. The 2 sunnahs after the adhan. Total innovation. The sunnah, what Prophet ﷺ said, is when you come into the masjid, you make 2 before you sit down. But they will come in and sit down, wait for the first adhan, and then they get up and make 2. So they have invented 2 units of prayer, for that space between 2 adhan. Which is nonsense. No origin. See? So, this is important, as you are studying fiqh, that you keep this in mind. And where in this area you find, these kind of things which have been handed down, the meaning has now been lost, nobody knows why they're doing it anymore. You need to research them. If it is pointless things, then clear them away and get back to the basics. Very important. Huh? Now, what the companions would do in order to come to some consensus, of opinion concerning any of these issues. We said that they would base their decisions or their ideas on something from Qur'an and Sunnah. The process that they used to arrive at this decision, because look at this, what happened? Where did they get this from? This idea of sending somebody else to make a pre-adhan. Where did this come from? Prophet Muhammad ﷺ didn't do this. However, for Ramadan, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ instructed Bilāl to make an adhan a few minutes before the adhan of Fajr. So there was a pre-adhan brought in. Two adhans. One before, to let the people know they're eating at this time, suhoor. To let them know that the adhan of Fajr is coming. So Bilāl used to make the adhan a few minutes, 5 minutes before the adhan of Fajr. And Ibn Maktoum is the one who used to make the adhan for Fajr. So here is the basis. The idea of informing people using an adhan, which is not considered to be now the adhan, but a pre-adhan, in order to let people know that the adhan is coming, they instituted it. Now this principle of analogy, where a need existed for those who are eating to hear, to be made aware that the adhan is coming, the need arose here where people could no longer hear the adhan inside from the masjid. They made an analogy between the adhan, the pre-adhan of fasting, and the need for a pre-adhan for Jum'ah. That process is called qiyas. Qiyas. So qiyas is your fourth principle. Qiyas. And it is by qiyas represents the methodology of deduction of laws from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. It is the fundamental or basic methodology used in deducing laws from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Now, the thing to note, these basic four are common to most of what became known as the schools of Islamic law. These schools evolved sometime after the companions, really around the latter part of the Umayyad dynasty, which is ending around the middle of the 8th century, and into the early Abbasid dynasty, which continues down to the middle of the 10th century. What happened is that in the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, all law was coming from him, from the Qur'an and the Sunnah. However, he did train his companions in deduction of law, in understanding and applying the law. He trained them in what was known as ijtihad. Ijtihad. That is, studying a circumstance, gathering the evidence with regards to it, and coming up with a ruling or a decision as to how to handle that circumstance, called ijtihad. The Prophet ﷺ had said that whoever seeks to find out the correct ruling and is wrong gets one reward. And if he is right, or she is right, they get two rewards. However, he also said that there are three judges, two in hell and one in paradise. You have two sides of the coin now. One, he said, if you strive to find out the correct ruling and you are wrong, Allah will reward you one reward for that effort that you made. And if you are correct, you get two rewards. But at the same time, he said something as a warning to the other side of the coin. He said, there are three judges. Two are in hell and one in paradise. That is, judges may be put into three categories. Two of those categories are heading for hell and one heading for paradise. The judge, the one who judges without knowledge, is going to hell, whether he is right in his judgment or wrong. Yes. Okay? First one going to hell. Whether right or wrong, going to hell. Because he's put himself in a situation where he's making a ruling and it's not based on knowledge. That is a sin in Islam. Allah says in the Qur'an, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. If you don't know, ask those who know. Don't make decisions for people and you don't have knowledge. Don't. Because that is such a dangerous situation. The Prophet ﷺ said, such a person, even if they are right, if they found the right decision, they made the right decision, turned out to be right, they are still going to hell. That's too harsh. You can't deal with that. The second group are those who know the evidence. They know the correct decision and they make the wrong ruling. Going to hell. They know what is right and they choose a wrong ruling for one reason or the other, because it involves their family or somebody's paying them off or whatever. But they're not making the ruling according to the knowledge that they have. That one's going to hell also. And the one who's going to paradise is the one who judges according to knowledge. He's going to paradise. Whether he's right or wrong, he's going to paradise. Understand? So can you see the two sides of the coin? We are encouraged to seek correct knowledge in the course of making decisions. It is not permissible for us to just make knowledges off the top of our heads. Giving my own opinion, I think it's all right, if you make this tasbih, if you having trouble with your fingers counting, you can't keep track of the numbers, better to use this tasbih. Or it's ideas off the top of your head.
About the unit form of government, any state of the role by one man. The decision is made by one man. For example, Mao Zedong was alive. He's the one making the decision. What is your observation on that?
Well, so the idea of the final decision being made by one person in Islam, this is not something which is considered unacceptable. That's one form of leadership, it is okay. But, you see, the leader in Islam, whether it be an individual or a group, their decisions are only executive decisions. They're not legislative decisions. Two different things. Legislation belongs only to God. Hukum, legislation, the law, establishing the law, this belongs only to God. Executing that law, that's man's domain. That's the Islamic point of view concerning the government. So you can have one person who makes a decision in terms of the execution, or you can have a group deciding about the execution, but the making of the law itself. That legislation belongs only to Allah. We have to, according to Islam, our leaders, no matter what, in Islam, if the whole ummah decides on a law or cancelling a law from Sharia, it is unacceptable. Even if everybody feels it is in the best interest of all of us to cancel this law, it is unacceptable. It's haram. Sinful. If we all agree not to use a particular law, for example, though the law is applicable, it is sinful. Our job is only in the application aspects. We cannot cancel any law, nor can we make any new law, fundamental laws. We can make laws which are secondary laws on the basis of the fundamental laws. Like traffic lights, for example. You have traffic laws. You're supposed to stop when the light is red. This is a law, it's not in Sharia. You cannot say that we can find Qur'an and Sunnah where it says to traffic, you know. We don't have any traffic laws in Qur'an and Sunnah. Agreed that homosexuality is no longer a sin. The law of Moses is clear. Death for the homosexual. Homosexual who's caught in the act, the punishment, according to Mosaic law, the law which followed by Jesus, is death. And in Islam, it's the same thing, death. Same law. However, Christians today have cancelled that law. Whereas in Islam, no matter if the whole ummah agreed that homosexuality was okay, it is not acceptable. It's a sin. It remains a sin. It can never be changed. That's the difference. In any case, the point that we were raising here was that during the time of the Sahaba, the time of the Prophet Muhammad, he trained his companions in making ijtihad, making decisions of their own based on things that he told them to do. Okay? And as I said, he gave them these warnings to understand that, the decisions should be based on knowledge. The classical example given is the command that he gave to his companions that they should make their prayer of Asr in the area of the clan of Bani Qurayza. They were going to do battle with them, and he told them, a group set off ahead, and he told them, don't make Asr except in the area of the clan of Bani Qurayza, in their territory. On the way, the group that was going ahead, on the way, the time for Asr came. They had to make a decision. What did the Prophet Muhammad mean? Did he mean that we should hurry up so that we get to Bani Qurayza and make Asr there? Or did he actually literally mean that we will keep going until we reach Bani Qurayza and then make Asr? Because these two meanings could be understood from that statement. Half of them felt it meant one, and half felt it meant the other. So half of them prayed there, and the others continued, and they joined up together. And afterwards, Prophet ﷺ came, and they related it to him. And he didn't say either was wrong. However, he himself prayed Asr on the way. And he informed them that the best is to pray Salah at its time. See? He didn't say they were wrong because what he said to them implied two possibilities. So for one to make a decision based on the meaning of what he said here was something which could not be blameworthy. We cannot say this person is wrong because of it. However, the better decision was to pray Asr when it came in. He demonstrated by his own practice that that was the better decision. But he let that circumstance take place because if he would wished, he could have given them the details. But this was training them in the process of ijtihad, making certain decisions on their own. And of course, after the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, we find that the companions started to apply these principles quite extensively. Now, during the period of Abu Bakr, the righteous caliph, the school of thought was that of the caliph. You could say the madhab of the caliph, whoever it was. In the time of Abu Bakr, the final say was his. People had other opinions, but everybody submitted to Abu Bakr. When Abu Bakr died, Omar took over. And he changed, he had certain opinions which were different from Abu Bakr, he changed them in his time. When he was now the final decision maker. And the school of thought, you could say, was that of Omar. And so on. Uthman, Ali. Afterwards, when things shifted, when the leadership shifted from caliphate, righteous caliphate, into kingship in the time of the Umayyads, you find that the caliphs started to bring in the kings, you could call them, but they call themselves caliphs. They were starting to bring in certain innovations. And the scholars, see, in the time of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, there were amongst the companions some of them who were most noteworthy, scholarly, noted for their abilities to deduce. They had gathered a large portions of the Sunnah, etc. So they were known to be like the fuqaha, or the scholars amongst the Sahaba. Famous amongst them were what they called the Abadila. All of them had the name Abdullah. There's Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Umar, and the fourth Abdullah, I forget what his name is. But they were called the Abadila, meaning the Abdullahs. And they were known as the fuqaha among the Sahaba. It's a group of them, right? What would happen in the time of the caliphs, the righteous caliphs, is that these scholars would always be close to the caliph. He could always call on them. They would always be there to provide information for him. There was that constant exchange between them. However, when the leadership changed into kingship, and the leaders were now not the choice of the people anymore, but were being imposed upon the people, the scholars started to distance themselves from this leadership because they did not want to be identified with corruption. So the scholars spread out. The center of Islam used to be Mecca and Medina. Now they spread out, going into Iraq, into Damascus, going into Egypt. They're spreading out to different parts. And in the different areas, of course, people had problems which were arising in their areas. And the outstanding scholars, this is not only the Sahaba now, this is the generation after, they would try to make rulings for the people. The process of the collection of the Sunnah was starting to take place at this time also. And because the Islamic state was so wide, you had people so far in so many different areas, individual scholars would appear to be the most notable in different areas. And there were many. They had around them students who would study with them. They had gathered statements of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. They had memorized the Qur'an. They were well versed in the various areas of the language, etc. And they would make rulings for the people. So at this period of time, there was a abundance of schools of thought, what you call the madhabs. There were many there, hundreds. Right? However, in time, these numbers started to decrease for a number of different factors. Some of them were political, some of them were just historical. The numbers of the different madhabs started to decrease. As the communication network increased, the leading scholars themselves began to choose in areas, certain areas, some who were the most outstanding and left rulings to them. Others became more like teachers and censors as opposed to ones making rulings. This was a factor involved. Another factor was that some of the scholars ran into conflicts with the kings of the time, the Umayyad kings. And when they wouldn't give rulings in accordance to what the kings wanted, they had to go into hiding. So they couldn't have students anymore. So they disappeared. Their school, their thought, their ideas more or less disappeared. And in this process though, where there was that flowering, that increase, some other principles arose as being sources, recognized sources for Islamic law. The fifth principle came to be known as istihsan. Istihsan. Qiyas, we said, meant deduction by analogy. Right? Comparing two things where we find there's a similarity between the two, then we bring the ruling from one to the other. In the case of istihsan, the term istihsan actually comes from the word hasan, or the verb hasuna, to become good. Hasuna, that's the original verb. And the name Hasan comes from it. Muhsin, Ihsan, all of them come from the same root, meaning good. Anytime you see this combination in front of a verb in Arabic, isti, it means seeking, to seek, right? So, literally this means seeking the better, or seeking the best, seeking the good. And this, has been put into layman's term as legal preference. Legal preference. What is meant by this is that if you came to a decision, you're looking into an issue arises, you have to make a decision, you're using your qiyas. Your qiyas gives you a conclusion which is not appropriate to your circumstance. You choose another ruling over your conclusion by qiyas, based on the inappropriateness of the ruling which came from qiyas. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever sells food should not do so until he has it in his own possession. Right? Whoever sells food should not do so until he has it in his own possession. What is understood from this is that if one doesn't have a product, you cannot sell it. This is the general conclusion which may be drawn by a qiyas from that. If one doesn't have the product, you cannot sell it. Huh? No, but I'm just saying, the principle, Prophet said, whoever sells food should not do so until he has it in his own possession. No, wait a second. You're selling food, you cannot do so unless you have it in your own possession. You have cooked the food, at this point you can sell it. This is the statement of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, which is authentic. However, this implies that you cannot make any contract for manufacturing anything, right? You want somebody to build a house for you. You cannot go into a contract with this person because until that house is there, he cannot sell it. It's not in his possession. You follow? That is the conclusion which will be drawn from this statement of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. I want to sell you apples. I cannot sell you according to Islamic law. I cannot sell you apples which are on a tree. If I'm going to sell you apples, you have to see these apples here in front of you. You must know you have it, the possession, your possession. I cannot say I'm going to sell you 2 kilos of apples. I got it on a tree. I'll go get it and bring it tomorrow. No. See, this is why it was this principle here. This principle was there to avoid deception. Because when I bring you the 2 kilos of apples, half of them are rotten and they're looking like, you see, you paid for 2 kilos. You agreed to buy my 2 kilos. So to avoid deception, the sale of food, it was required that the food be in your possession so you could see what you're buying. Very reasonable principle. However, if you take the implications of this principle into the area of contracts for manufacturing things, then it means you cannot make such contracts. I cannot buy a house. I cannot make a contract with a contractor. I pay you so much money, you build a house according to this design, whatever you can. Until that house is made, I can only go, like for example, some people you have contractors, they build houses, then they put them up for sale. That means that's the only way you could buy. Right? However, since the practice of buying things by way of contract is universally practiced around the world and accepted in society, then it was chosen, the ruling was in fiqh, that it was permissible to make such contracts. This is a legal preference. We are preferring the common acceptable practice over a conclusion which may come from qiyas. Because the conclusion is not actually revelation. It is a conclusion by deduction. So it doesn't mean that every deduction is correct or applicable. Sometimes it may be, but sometimes it may not be. So when I prefer another circumstance due to other factors, whether it be the universal practice in a given area, etc., this then becomes istihsan. The last principle which came into being was that of urf. Urf. Huh? Urf. Urf. Urf, it means really custom. And the principle here was that whenever there were customs amongst the people which did not contradict principles from Sharia, these customs would be acceptable as basis for legislation in a society. The customs of people became basis for legislation in society. For example, the word dabba according to the language, linguistically it means any animal which crawls on four. Any animal which walks or crawls on 4 feet. That's called a dabba. Okay? Dabba. In Syria, dabba means horse. They use it just to refer to horses. They use it just to refer to horses. So the classical Arabic word, because a dabba is a horse. But not every dabba is a horse, but every horse is a dabba. You see, specific and general. But in Syria, when you use the term dabba, it means horse right away, specifically. That is the custom, that is the urf. So now if we made a contract, right, in Syria, which says that I will sell you a dabba at $1,000. Technically, according to the language, somebody could bring an ant and say, okay, after collecting the $1,000, give him an ant. Because an ant is also a dabba. You see? But because the urf, the custom in Syria is that dabba becomes horse, then you are obliged to give only a horse. Because that is the custom of that area. So the ruling will be according to the local custom. Is that clear? Okay. Now, there is one thing that we are faced with, which is important for us to understand, because there are some things that I've mentioned to you which go against local practices. Those who belong to a particular madhab, school of thought, legal thought, we call like Shafi'i school here. You have other practices which are attributed to other schools of thought, How do we understand the differences amongst these different schools? How does one deal with these differences? Question: are we required to follow a particular school of legal thought? Some people propose that you must. You must follow a particular school of thought. Some people teach that all the schools of thought are correct. Schools of thought are correct. There are 4 main ones. They're all correct. But you must follow one. However, if one accepts this principle, then one ends up like Christians. How? According to the Shafi'i school of thought, if you make wudu and you accidentally brush against a woman, your wudu is nullified. Your state of purity is nullified. You have to make ablution over again. However, according to the Hanafi school of thought, if you make wudu and you brush against a person, your wudu is intact. Now, if both of these schools of thought were correct, then it means technically that it is possible for you to be in a state of impurity and out of a state of and in a state of purity at the same time. Is that possible? Is it possible to be in a state of wudu and out of wudu at the same time? Huh? Is it? Is it possible? Could you have wudu and not have wudu at the same time?
No.
Huh? Think. You're all supposed to be teachers. Come on, think. Is that possible? Is it conceivable that you could have wudu and not have wudu at the same time? At the same time. At the same time. I know, you could have wudu now, and at a later time you could not have wudu. But is it possible for me in this one instance to have wudu and not have wudu at the same time? Huh?
You cannot do one thing at the same time. So do it should be no. Physically and mentally working. Example, you're doing the
Al-Baya, what is the answer? Is it possible or not? It is possible. Okay, explain to me how it is possible that you could have wudu and yet not have wudu at the same time. Explain how. No, but in fact, you see, I'm not talking about the opinion. We're talking about in fact. Is it possible for you not to have wudu and yet have wudu at the same time? In fact, this is theory. Theory is that Hanafi says you have wudu. Theory is Shafi'i says you don't have wudu. But can you actually be in a state of wudu and out of wudu at the same time? No. It's not possible. It's not possible. Yeah, after you can, after. It's possible to have and then not have after. But at the same time, no. That's not possible. It is not, that's not reality. It means that because think about it this way. If you have wudu, you can make prayer. If you don't have wudu, you cannot make prayer. So is it possible that you can make prayer which is acceptable and not and make prayer which is that same prayer which is not, can that prayer be acceptable and not acceptable at the same time? Either it is acceptable or it's not acceptable. See, these are two opposites. See, try to understand. Opposites cannot exist simultaneously. You cannot be up and down at the same time. You understand?
For example, you sing, sing is different from action now. You sing, then at the same time with action. There are two different things here now. You sing, then action. Because there are singers singing with action at the same time. You can act.
No. But these are not, singing or saying is not the opposite of acting. These things, see, there are things which can exist, can coexist. Things can coexist. There are certain things which can coexist. But opposites cannot coexist. The opposite, things that are opposites. Can you be short and tall at the same time? Can you be fat and thin at the same time? No. You see, these are opposites. These opposites cannot coexist. Being in wudu, being out of wudu are opposites. Being in wudu allows you to pray. Being out of wudu does not allow you to pray. So it is impossible for you to be in a state where you can pray and at the same time you can't pray. No, either you can pray or you can't pray. It's either one or the other. Either you have wudu or you don't have wudu. You cannot have and not have at the same time. If you accept that you can have and not have at the same time, then you become, as I said, like Christians who accept that God can be one and three at the same time. You see? Something which is illogical, which goes against all logic. Everything tells you that 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3, but you turn your brain off and you accept that 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1. You see? That's it. Only one is right. You see, and this is why when Imam Malik was asked, if we were to follow a companion of the Prophet, in every single thing that he did, would we be on the right path? Malik said, no, unless what they were doing was correct. Because the truth is one. The truth is one.
So this is the problem now in our place. Because sometimes if we ask the learned person, they are going to answer, oh yes, it could be because that is the Mazhab of Hanafi. Then if you go to another, no, it could be because this is the Mazhab of Shafi'i. So according to them, we can follow either of Shafi'i or Hanafi. We can follow Shafi'i or we can follow the Hanafi.
See, what happens here, as I said, there are some times when things are opposites, and which cannot coexist at the same time. Then there are some times when there are more than one ways to do the same thing, which can coexist at the same time. For example, in the case of prayer, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he raised his hands sometimes to the level of his shoulders. Sometimes he raised his hands to the level of his ears. He did both. In something like that, you can do one or do the other. Because why? Because they're both divinely revealed.
What do you do?
Wait, no, okay? I'm just trying to show you the difference between the two. You see, we have two methodologies in terms of salah. Why? Because Prophet Muhammad, he didn't say touch his ears. Now, some people go back and they want to touch their ears and, all kinds of things. He just said he raised his hands to the level of his ears. Yeah, some people want to put your thumb. You're not sure where your ears are, you're making sure. No, he raised his hands to the level of his ears, right? Or to the level of his shoulders. Now, these are two actions which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did. As such, we have a choice. If one school of thought is following one action, another is following the other, we can choose either one we wish, or we can do both. Sometimes we do one, sometimes we do the other. Because that's what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did. Perfectly okay. However, there are some things, as in the case of wudu, which cannot coexist. You cannot consider your prayer valid and invalid at the same time. You see, if you are going to use this principle in the same way, then it becomes only a choice by whim. I pass and touch this woman. Today I think, okay, I have wudu. I'll pray. Because I don't feel like going to make wudu. Another day I pass and I touch another woman. I don't have wudu. Because there's water nearby, so I make wudu again. Now, then it will be according to whim. How do you decide? Either you have wudu or you don't have wudu. So how do you know which one is your situation? You have to now go back to Sharia. Go back to the sources of Islamic law to see where is the evidence. And when you go back, you find clear evidence that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used to kiss his wife Aisha and go into the masjid and lead the people in prayer. Now, if touching a woman broke your wudu, then it's saying that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was making salah without wudu. And that is inconceivable. Unacceptable. So on the basis of the practice of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the correct ruling is that if you accidentally touch somebody, your wudu is intact. It does not break you.
What if it is intentional?
No. Did the Prophet Muhammad kiss Aisha by accident? Was it an accident that he kissed her? It's intentionally. He intentionally kissed her. So it is not an issue of intention or not intention. The issue is that the act of touching somebody else does not break your state of wudu. The things which break your wudu are clearly defined by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. Either you have urinated, you have defecated, you define all the things. You passed wind, you fell asleep. All the things that break wudu are clearly defined.
In conclusion,
Huh?
marriage is wrong.
No, Shafi'i.
In conclusion, something is wrong
Yes,
for the person.
in that particular issue. The reality is that because the schools of thought, they were based on ijtihad. Ijtihad, it's ijtihad. Fiqh. Fiqh based on the information that was available to them. They were in different parts of the ummah. The sunnah had not all been gathered. All of the sayings of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. So they made rulings based on the information which they had. You see? And as such, each madhab has errors. Each of them has errors. But all of them contain the rulings of Islam. All of them contain the rulings of Islam. And you are not required to stay in one school of thought that you can only follow this one. No. You can go according to school that you choose. But the choice must be based on what? What must it be based on? Based on knowledge. See, because if you're making a decision based on your whims, that is, you go to Shafi'i when it's easier. When you find another issue, it's easier in Hanafi, you're a Hanafi. When it's easier as a Maliki, you're a Maliki. When it's easier as a Hanbali, you're a Hanbali. Then you're following your whims. You're not seeking the truth. See, that is haram. For you to run around just choosing which one seems to be the easier one for you, that becomes haram. Because it's not based on knowledge. It's based on whim. Right? It's based on whim. Whereas, what is perfectly okay is for you to go according to the evidence. Wherever the schools have the evidence, the one which is the correct evidence, that's the one you're following. That is the correct evidence. The correct evidence, that is the correct ruling. So that's how you should approach. Not to say that whatever you've studied so far, now you have to throw it out the door because it was all Shafi'i. No. It's all right. What your basis is from Shafi'i, it's fine. You carry on. But you know that whenever an issue arises and the evidence concerning that issue is in another school of thought, then you will leave that position from the Shafi'i school and follow the evidence. Because Imam Shafi'i himself said, إِذَا صَحَّ الْحَدِيث فَهُوَ مَذْهَبِي. If the evidence is an authentic tradition from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that is the school of thought that I intended to follow. You see? So he's telling you that you follow what is correct. Don't just follow me blindly. You follow what is correct. And he said also, whenever you find a ruling of mine which conflicts with the Qur'an or the Sunnah, throw my ruling aside and follow the Qur'an and Sunnah. That was Imam Shafi'i. That was all the scholars. They took that same position. But in ignorance, see, after what is known as the fall of Baghdad in 1258, in that period, the period prior to it and the period after it, there was a great decline in the study of fiqh. Actually, prior to the fall of Baghdad, two things occurred. You had the translation of the Greek classics. Aristotle, Plato, etc. And Greek ideas of logic and reasoning came in. Scholars who were involved in fiqh, etc., where they found principles which were useful, they added it in their lines of reasoning, etc. However, Greek philosophy, if you're not careful, it can turn you into a person who can never be pinned down. A philosopher who always has an excuse to get out. You know, it's an issue about, he will always find a loophole here or there. You can never pin him down. Remember Greek philosophy, and I pointed out to you this before. Greek philosophers argued that if you walk to the wall, you will never reach it. No two bodies collide. You remember I explained this to you? Remember? Why? Why, if you walk to the wall, you will never reach it? And why no two bodies collide? Why? Huh? Why? Right. Because for you to make contact with anybody, for me to reach out and touch this, I must have the distance between me and that object. And after having it, our mathematics teacher can tell us that you can continue having infinitely. So you keep having the halves of the halves of the halves of the halves, you never reach it. But reality is you reach and touch it, finished. You've halved all the halves to infinity and come back and touch it. Okay? That's the reality. But theoretically, philosophically, you never reach the wall. You cannot touch, no two things collide. That is the danger that is involved there in that philosophy. And unfortunately, that aspect was also included in the schools of thought. And it was exaggerated by a practice which began in the courts of the Abbasid caliphs. Now the caliphs, in the middle to latter part of the Abbasid caliphate, they used to have in their courts different people to entertain the caliph and his entourage. Right? He would have people around him, right? Among them, they may have some dancers, singing girls. I mean, of course, these are forbidden things, right? They would have musicians. They would have jugglers, comedians. At different times, these people would come and perform, to entertain the caliph and his entourage. Well, amongst the entertainers was the court scholar. The court scholar. He would have one scholar from the Shafi'i madhab, and he would have another scholar from the Hanafi madhab. And then they would invent some problem. And the two scholars would debate what is the correct ruling on this problem. Whoever won the debate would get a little bag of gold, prize. Now, what that promoted were two things. One, speculative fiqh, going into areas which have no relevance to reality. You find in the books of fiqh written at this time, where people got caught up in this, in the Shafi'i books, you'll find actually these books are still around till today. Though modern books on fiqh, you don't find it in there, but the older books are still there. You will find the issue. If somebody passed wind into a bag, passing wind to fart. You know what passing wind is? You know what this is? To pass wind. If wind comes out, you're behind. Good. We call this passing wind in English, right? Passing wind. This is a nice way to say it. It's called fart also, right? Okay? If you did that and caught it in a bag, right? If you caught it in a bag, right? Bad wind. So in English it's called passing wind. Okay? In English, huh? Now if you passed wind into a bag and you closed this bag, right? And you made wudu and then released the bag and the wind came out, does that break your wudu or not? Now this is an issue which is stupid. It's just nonsense. Total nonsense. But this came up in these debates and became a point and ended up in some books. Also, there in the Hanafi books you'll find the issue. For example, if a man has sex with a fish, what is the ruling on this person? A fish. Nonsense. Nonsense. Okay. Nonsense. But it ended up in books. You know? Because it came out of this circumstance here, where people were just making up circumstances which really didn't exist, or circumstances which are totally irrelevant. So you find a body of fiqh developing, which is what they call purely speculative, having no, link to reality. Right? Two, what happened is that because these two scholars would be arguing, right? The one who reached who won the argument was the victor. And he was not only the individual victor, he was the victor for his madhab. You see, that is superiority of the Hanafi madhab over the Shafi'i. So what happened is that Shafi'i, even if they were arguing on an issue, he wouldn't give up. He would be fighting to the last tooth and nail. He would be pulling all his Greek philosophy from here and there, trying to get out of it. Because they're not about the truth anymore. It's about winning the argument. You see? So the issues of being a Hanafi became, you were a Hanafi until you died. This one was a Shafi until he died. See, the rigidness, the rigid attitude towards belonging to one school and other school developed out of this period. And this rigidness reached the point that around the Kaaba in Mecca, they built the Blackstone here. They built 4 places for imams from the different madhabs. One over here, one over here, one over here, one over here. That is, when the time for prayer came, all of the people who are making tawaf, who are from the Shafi'i madhab, there would be an imam, he would stand up here and all the Shafi'is would come and stand up behind him and praise Allah. When they were finished, then the imam from the Hanbali madhab would stand up here, all the Hanbalis would come up and line up behind him and they would pray. And when it was finished, then the Maliki imam, he would come up here, line up, and all the Malikis would line up here behind him and pray. And when he This is where the rigidity concerning the different schools of thought led. It remains until now. It has decreased. Actually, it's not as intensive as it used to be in the past. Actually, in my book here called The Evolution of Fiqh, there is a picture of the Masjid, Mecca. This was taken in 1884. And here you can see in the picture the 4 different prayer places around the masjid. It wasn't until the 1920s when the Saudi family took over Saudi Arabia, right? At that point they removed these different places and said we will pray behind one. It doesn't matter what madhab he is. He leads the prayer, everybody must pray behind him. They stopped at that time. Because obviously, actually, it is against Islam. This is not meant. Remembering all of these schools of thought were the products of fiqh, ijtihad. In understanding. There was right and there was wrong. Some things you may have a variety of different ways to do it, but where there is right and wrong, it is important for us to find out what is the evidence and choose the correct method. Now, I'll just mention briefly some of the main reasons why the scholars differed, why you had these differences occurring in the first place. Okay? The first one had to do with the meanings of words, Arabic words. words have shared meaning. For example, the term qur. Qur. In Arabic, the term qur could mean either menses or the period of purity between the menses. Right? You have menses every 28 days. From one menses to the other menses, you are in a period of purity. Right? Qur, the term qur in Arabic, can refer either to the menses themselves or it can refer to the period of purity between the two. That is the Arabic language. It has that word implied two things. And in every language you will find that. Words which have shared meaning. For example, in English, we have the word Gary. Is it bow or is it bow? Is it bow or bow? The context is going to tell you which one it is. Bow or bow. Okay? Right. A bow, it could be a bow and a hair. It does not have to be bow tie. It could be bow and a hair, you know. Now, or it could be a bow, like a bow and arrow. There's a variety of different meanings. Many meanings for the word bow. And the word bow, it could mean bowing like that. Or if I use the word bow, it could also refer to the bough of a tree. The bough is a part of a tree. You know? So you have these are the shared meanings. Now context is going to tell you which one is right and which one is wrong. Now, sometimes the context doesn't actually tell you because the context could still carry both implications. As in the verse, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 228, Allah says, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. The divorced women should wait for 3 quru. Now what is it? Is it 3 menses or is it 3 periods of purity between the menses? Now, a person may say, well, what difference does it make? You have menses. 1. You have the period of purity. 2. You have the period of purity. 3. Okay? 3, if we say 3 menses, right? 3 menses. You have 1, 2, 3. And if you say periods of purity, you've got this period, 2, and you also have this period. Right? Right up until the beginning of this next menses here. Right? Now, the Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali schools ruled that qur meant the period of purity. Whereas the Hanafi school ruled that it meant the menses itself. We have a statement from Aisha, which is in An-Nasai and Abu Dawood, authentic, in which she said, Habiba had irregular menses, and she asked the Prophet about it. He told her to stop praying during the days of her qur. So the qur meant the menses. Yes. The qur meant the menses. Now, the ruling is that divorce cannot be pronounced in a period of purity in which sexual relations have taken place. Right? This is the law. And divorce cannot be pronounced at the time of menses either. And this is Islamic law. Why? Because in principle, if a man has sexual relations with his wife during that period of purity, then he loves her enough that he's having sexual relations with her. He shouldn't be divorcing her. If he's serious, then he would have finished. Okay, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. If he really wants divorce. Then, if he pronounces divorce when she is in her period, it could be because of the biological, psychological, biological factors which have led him to do that. Because a woman, when her menses is coming on, changes her psychology. It affects her. She becomes crabby or whatever, becomes down or up. It changes. So she may say things which she doesn't really mean. So, not allowed then. Because you may be pronouncing it over an issue which is back to her biological changes. So Islam doesn't allow you to pronounce it then. So you must wait for this period of purity, in which you didn't have relations in, after a period of menses which you didn't have. So there has to be one period of purity. Right? So then, your first menses becomes here. Your second menses becomes here, and actually this is where your third menses comes. Right? So, in the case of both positions, it still ends up being 3 periods. Right? Either way it comes. But, the difference comes where? It comes right here. If you believe that the qur is the menses, then the divorce doesn't end until the menses is over. The divorce doesn't end until the menses is over, because you have to wait for 3 menses. So the menses, the divorce won't be over, if it's 5 days or whatever, the divorce will be over on the 5th day of the menses. Whereas if you believe that qur was the period of purity, then the divorce ends at the end of the 3rd period of purity. In other words, at the beginning of the menses, the 3rd menses. That's where the difference is. The correct position is that it ends with the end of the 3rd menses. See, this issue shows you that in this case, 3 of the schools of thought held that it was purity. Only 1 school held that it was the menses. So it's not a question. Some people, they go according to the majority. If the majority say this, well, that's the one must be right. No, not necessarily. Here was a case of the majority believing it was the period of purity, when in fact that minority of 1 held that it was the menses, and that was the correct one, because that's the one supported by the evidence. The other example is that of, it's related to this, are words which have literal and figurative meanings. And I already gave you the example of that one, as in the case of lamp, if you touch women. The verse says, أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. That is, or if you have touched women and cannot find water, then make tayammum. That is, you have to come back into a state of wudu. If you have touched women, the word used, lamp. Lamp, it literally means touch. So the Shafi'i school took it that if you touched, if you at